This PC doesn't boot. This separate motherboard also doesn't boot. This GPU is also here. So let's fix that PC, that board, and really hope that GPU is fine. On this episode of PC Clinic, I diagnose and repair this AM4 system that won't boot, but it turned out a lot worse than I thought, so stick around to at least laugh at me.
Now, rather than go to the effort of plugging in the customer's GPU, I always keep a GT710 around. Actually, it's not a 710, it's a 730. We'll keep this around just for testing out graphics issues and other things like that. You can just use it as a basic display out.
As any PC repair guy will tell you, confirm the fault first. And indeed, there was no boot. Although I did notice the ROG symbol was lighting up. That may be less suspicious that it's the power supply, but nonetheless, I put my hubris aside and I thought, why not just try the bench PSU? But again, no boot. I even tried it with a screwdriver to jump the pins. At this point, I'd made some deductions. It can't be the RAM that causes this, it's not the PSU, and it's not the case power button either. The only two things that are going to cause this system not to come to life are either the CPU or the motherboard. So I used the heat gun on the lowest setting before taking off the cooler. AM4 owners will know why. Then I took out the CPU, which was a Ryzen 5800X. Pins looked completely fine, no problems with it. I always keep this Athlon 200GE knocking around for exactly this kind of moment, and it's seen some things, as you can tell from the IHS. I slotted that in and the PC actually booted fine. If you're wondering why I've not put a cooler on it while booting it, it's totally fine, especially for an Athlon, just for a couple of seconds to check that it boots. I was a bit sad because the guy only just bought this CPU and motherboard, so as a bit of a sanity check, I thought, why don't I just put that 5800X back in and see what happens? And actually it worked, so it must have just been seated incorrectly. Problem solved, right? Well, kinda. There are some other issues here. We've got 3 RAM sticks instead of 2 or 4. We've got a load of caked on dust, and there's an SSDs just sort of floating around in the bottom of the PC.
So I just got off the phone with Troy, and he wants me to actually give his PC a nice clean and cable managed, get it look really, really nice. So that's what we're going to do now. And instead of payment, this guy's a legend. He said, that broken B450 board and that Ryzen 5600X, he said, I don't want it anymore, you just keep it. So I said, okay, fine, let me do your clean and cable managed for free and I'll make sure I do a good job, because that's definitely a good deal for me. So that's what we're gonna do now. You meet so many cool people when you do like little services and things out in your community. It's one of the things I really enjoy about doing it, because the money isn't actually very much, but it is really good fun. It's very satisfying to restore a PC to a much better state, especially when you see the customer's face when they get the thing back.
We'll get back to the other motherboard later. As you can see, there's nothing better to do in the British weather anyway. So I began by taking apart the system completely. Everything came out. I used an electrical duster to get rid of the worst of the grime, then some isopropyl alcohol for the rest. Then I rebuilt the PC, but more problems were seen. Improper SSD mounting, which I fixed, and also somehow bent pins on a SATA SSD. I arranged this other SSD onto this plate, and the broken one I tried to jury rig into staying connected with tape and a cable tie. I took out the RAM and just put in 2 sticks matching the serial numbers. And at the end, we were able to post again into the BIOS. But hold your applause, because things went very badly wrong.
I really messed this one up. It was supposed to be a really simple job. I have absolutely messed up, and that is not like me. Normally, I'm so on it.
Do you remember that ADATA SSD that had all the bent pins that I thought the customer had done and just left it in the case? Turns out I somehow broke that. I don't remember doing it, but I tried the NVMe SSD that was in this PC, I tried the WD SSD that was in this PC, and neither of them would boot to Windows. So I was really confused what happened. I put them into external enclosures, plugged that into my laptop. None of them had any Windows system files on it. So I was like, well, the only other drive here was that ADATA. I don't remember bending those pins, but maybe I took the steel panel off the back and it pulled on the SATA plug or something. I don't know. There was an angled plug in that drive, if I remember correctly. So maybe in the process of moving some things around, maybe I sheared it off or something. Or maybe at some point the customer damaged that little plastic housing bit and just left the pins there, which obviously leaves them very fragile. I don't know what happened. But my bacon has been essentially saved by my years of experience messing things up. And I will make this good with the customer. So let me show you through my workflow. My forward planning has actually come in clutch to save me. So basically, you see this SanDisk SSD here, I have this spare.
So I'm going to give this one to the customer. It's actually double the size of the one it's replacing and basically the same spec. So the customer is getting a better drive. But what I really didn't want to do was lose their data, because I'd really be annoyed if I did that. So what I did is I completely shelled the SSD and just took out the PCB with the connector on it. Obviously, it's got the flash on it. I have two USB SATA readers. The first one, my Sabrent one, didn't pick it up. I found this one that I also bought for 3.5-inch drives, and thankfully this one was able to read even those bent pins. So what I've done is I do have a USB with Partition Wizard on it with a bootable state. So I'm copying all of the data from this ADATA one with the busted pins, and then I'm going to put that onto this SanDisk. You might be wondering why the USB works, but it doesn't just work when it's plugged into the motherboard. I tried all the different SATA plugs and everything. I think with these USB ones, they have a bit more tolerance, so they'll reach in a bit further. So it's making contact with that pin that's sort of half snapped off. So I'm very unlucky, but also very lucky that I have prepared myself accordingly. Things like having this Partition Wizard USB, having this USB reader has really come in clutch here. So whilst it's not my finest hour, I am able to make this up to the customer and actually sort them out with a free upgrade. Oh my god. In case you're wondering why that fan's a bit wonky, the SSD mounts on some points on the side here, so I had to move the fan out of the way in order to be able to mount and unmount the SSD from the side panel, that's all. Well, Jesus Christ, I think I've never been so happy to see a Windows login screen. Obviously, I've blurred the customer's photo and their name, but Jesus, I'm very happy that we managed to sort that out without any problems. It's not 12:15 at night. It's not. That's wrong. The time is wrong. It's like 9:30 in the evening. So, end of the day, sometimes you mess up. At least I've made it right. I've given the customer an upgraded SSD. I'm going to offer him the opportunity as well to move his Windows installation onto his M2 SSD, because surely that's better. In truth, having reflected on this, I think it was 50% my fault, 50% always going to happen at some point, because the way that I took that drive out, there is absolutely no way that I gave enough force to snap off both the plastic housing and the pins. So I think the plastic housing was already off somewhere, and those pins were just waiting to be bent by anybody that happened to service the computer. So I'm not going to feel too bad about it on reflection, but obviously not ideal. So now that everything is working again, I decided to crack on and finish up on this service. In the end, I think the result is impressive. If we look at the before and after, it is a clear improvement, cleaner and neater. So earlier I mentioned the customer traded in his quote-unquote broken motherboard CPU combo. Turns out after trying all the DIMM slots and even that Athlon CPU as a substitute, that it was just one of the memory channels that was broken on the board. That was it. The CPU works great and it is booting. And more importantly, I now have a working Ryzen 5 5600X and a partially working motherboard in exchange for all these hours of turmoil. Okay, so when all is said and done, what do we actually have to show for it at the end of the process? So we did fix the original problem with the PC. The only problem was that the CPU wasn't seated correctly. So we charged a sort of regular diagnostic fee for that. And then the customer said, well, why don't you just give it a clean and a cable manage? So yeah, perfectly fine. We did that. Usually I'd charge, I don't know, like 50 quid for that. But the customer said, look, if you're going to keep that B450 motherboard and that Ryzen 5, if you can make use of it, why don't we just say that that part of the service can be free? So I was like, fine. So we've made £50 so far for far too many hours work, but we have gained that slightly faulty B450 motherboard and a perfectly functioning Ryzen 5600X. So I'm not too worried about that. We also did have to give the customer that SanDisk SSD because I don't know what happened. I must have broken that SSD. I think that SSD was already on its last legs and the plastic housing was off, meaning that whoever tried to open that cage would have bent the pin off anyway. That's my excuse. But either way, it doesn't matter. Like, if you make a mistake, that's fine. You know, lots of people on YouTube aren't going to show the mistakes, but if I've made a mistake, I've made the mistake. As long as you make it right, I gave the customer an SSD that I had spare.
It's technically an upgrade. I think everybody's happy here. I mean, this is a new format for me. That's why it's not quite as polished as my other videos. Let me know if you enjoyed this kind of thing. And crucially, I want to know what kind of build or what kind of project should I do with that B450 motherboard and that Ryzen 5600X? Because we could make a really cheap budget build that we could sell to somebody at a really low price for their first PC. So let me know what you think is best in the comments. God, it's been a while since I've used this camera to do an outro. All right, bye.